It was a stormy evening when Flight 329 took off, its passengers unaware of the nightmare that awaited them. The weather had turned in an instant as the plane ascended through thick clouds, lightning illuminating the sky with flashes of blue-white light. Captain Hernandez tried to steady the aircraft, but turbulence rattled the cabin, throwing passengers from side to side. Some gripped their armrests tightly, others closed their eyes in terror. The storm was relentless. The turbulence grew worse, the wind howling, and then a sudden, deafening roar split the air. The lights flickered out, and for a terrifying moment, the plane was plunged into complete darkness. Then, with a horrifying lurch, the plane was torn apart, spiraling toward the earth. Nathan, a young man on the flight, awoke to a world of chaos. The wreckage of the plane lay scattered across the jungle floor like broken toys. His head throbbed, and his body ached with pain. But he was alive. The world around him was eerily quiet. No sounds of distant rescue teams, no birds, no animals, just the oppressive stillness of the jungle. His first instinct was to move. He knew the forest was vast and wild, and the wreckage was his only point of reference. The faint smell of burning wood and plastic clung to the air. The flight attendants, the other passengers, were all gone, their screams lingering in his memory like ghosts. Nathan forced himself to his feet. He needed shelter, food, and water. He surveyed the wreckage, but there was nothing usable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, a chilling breeze whispered through the trees. He realized that the jungle was not only unfamiliar, it was alive. The trees seemed to bend toward him, their twisted branches resembling the gnarled fingers of some unseen creature. The air was thick with the scent of decay. He moved cautiously, scanning the shadows for any signs of danger. It wasn't long before he began hearing strange noises, low growls, branches snapping in the distance, and whispers that seemed to come from the wind itself. His heart raced as he quickened his pace, the overwhelming sense of being watched gnawing at his mind. By the time nightfall came, Nathan had stumbled upon a small clearing. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He set up camp, making a fire with the little he could find. As the flames flickered and danced, the jungle around him came alive with eerie sounds. A howl echoed through the trees, sending a shiver down his spine. He looked around, but nothing was there. Sleep was fitful. Every sound seemed to draw him back to the fire. When morning came, Nathan broke camp and decided to venture deeper into the jungle. He needed to find a way out, but the jungle seemed endless. The paths twisted and turned in ways that made no sense. At times, it felt like the jungle itself was shifting, growing, expanding. Days passed. Nathan found small streams to drink from, but the constant fear gnawed at him. He had seen no other signs of life except for strange markings on trees, carved symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint glow under the moonlight. The forest was older than anything he had ever imagined, and the markings seemed to tell a story, one that he wasn't sure he wanted to understand. One day, as Nathan trudged through the jungle, he stumbled upon something unexpected, a structure, half buried in the undergrowth. It was an old building, its walls crumbling and covered in thick vines. The windows were shattered, and the door hung off its hinges. Something about it felt wrong, as though it had been waiting for him. Reluctantly, he stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, and the floorboards creaked under his weight. The interior was dark, but as his eyes adjusted, Nathan saw signs of past life, discarded clothes, empty cans of food, and an old, cracked mirror. It was a place where someone had been, someone who had left in a hurry. On a table in the corner, he spotted a journal. He opened it, flipping through the pages with trembling hands. The journal's entries were erratic, filled with ramblings about strange occurrences in the jungle. The writer spoke of creatures in the night, of whispers that never stopped, and of a growing presence that lurked in the trees. The last entry was a hasty scribble. They are here. They never leave. If you hear the whispers, don't turn around. Nathan's stomach turned. The whispers, he had heard them. But where had they come from? What did they mean? Suddenly, the jungle outside stirred. Nathan froze. The air shifted, and then there it was, a voice, soft and distant, calling his name. Nathan, his heart skipped a beat. His name in that same whisper repeating over and over. It was impossible, but it sounded so real. Nathan snapped the journal shut and bolted from the building. He didn't know where to run, but he had to leave. The jungle had become a living nightmare. He heard the whispers again, this time closer, louder, urging him to look behind. But Nathan knew better than to give in to the madness. He had to survive. He ran faster, pushing his body to the limit, ignoring the pain in his legs, the sharp thorns scratching at his skin. That night, after hours of running, he collapsed near a small river. Exhausted and shaken, he dared to close his eyes, but sleep brought no peace. In the darkness, shapes danced just beyond his vision, shadows that never quite formed into anything tangible, but always watched him. And then there was the figure, a tall, thin silhouette that loomed just at the edge of his campfire's light. Nathan's breath hitched. The figure was wearing a hood, but he couldn't see its face. It didn't move, just stood there, watching. Nathan scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding. He reached for a branch, ready to defend himself. But when he looked back, the figure was gone. He was alone again, but the terror remained. The days blurred into one another. Nathan was losing track of time. He couldn't remember when he had last eaten or slept. The jungle pressed in on him, its oppressive weight wearing down his mind. Every night, the whispers returned, growing louder and more frantic. At times, he could hear voices, not just one, but many, all speaking in an ancient language that twisted his thoughts. One morning, he stumbled upon something that stopped him cold. A wreck, a plane half sunk into the jungle floor. It was the same model as the one he had been on, the same markings on the tail. But this wreck wasn't new. It had been here for years, maybe decades. The fuselage was rusted and weathered, the glass shattered, and inside, there were no bodies, only the eerie stillness of abandonment. Nathan approached cautiously, his hands trembling. The door to the cockpit was slightly ajar. As he stepped inside, the air grew colder. He saw a figure in the captain's seat, slumped over, eyes staring blankly ahead. He recognized the face. It was Captain Hernandez, the pilot. But there was something wrong. The face was too pale, the eyes too hollow. Nathan stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat. He didn't know what he was seeing, but he knew one thing. This was no ordinary crash site. The jungle had taken him, just as it had taken the others. The whispers, the figures, the shadows, they were all part of something ancient, something that had been waiting for him. Nathan tried to run again, but the jungle wouldn't let him go. The whispers grew louder, closer, until they filled his mind, drowning out everything else. He could feel the presence all around him, closing in. And then, in that moment, he understood. The jungle was not just alive, it was cursed, and he was its newest prisoner. The last thing Nathan heard was the sound of his name being whispered one final time before everything went dark.